We're going to have a forum this afternoon which is called Generating and Sustaining the Two-Way Flow of Knowledge. So it's not just transfer, but it's exchange we're talking about. And we have, I think all of you have,
No.
They don't have a piece of paper, okay. So they've just got the, well, I'll just read a little bit from a piece of paper that I've got. Must be a briefing for those who are giving presentations. And this says that, that there's a continuing awareness that while many of the technical aspects of knowledge transfer are well addressed by communications and dissemination approaches, the real issue of getting a productive relationship between researchers and policy makers remains an area that could be improved, obviously, and with more experience you gain skills in doing that. And we know that I don't like to talk about barriers too much because I like to talk about ways of merging policy with research and vice versa. But we know that we have different cultures, different languages and so on, which makes it hard to know how to get the linkage and exchange going well. So what we're doing today is having some panellists here. We have, as you met this morning, Chris Carlile from the department. He's Assistant Secretary in the Policy Performance and Quality Branch. John Flannery, who is AMA Media Advisor. So he's on that, he's on the phone wanting to know what the latest piece of research is. Anne-Marie Boxall, who's Director of the Deeble Institute, and Jennifer Doggett, who is a health consultant. And they're going to be spending 10 minutes. I think my main job is to keep them within their time. And the main focus of what they're going to address is what should be in the mind of a CRE researcher when working out how to communicate with a generalist audience for policy influence. So that's their brief. And then we, after they've spoken, will have a plenary open session just for a little while to talk about things like how you get your message across, what to do if you're not getting it across, if you can do anything, how can you ensure your message is understood and well enough understood for it to become the starting point for realistic action. What's the difference between what a researcher would identify as a key message and what a policymaker would identify as a key message? What's the best way the department communicates its understanding of what makes a message valuable, useful or key? So there's some of the issues that we can think about as the speakers address the issue, what should be in the mind of the CRE researcher when working out how to communicate with a generalist audience for policy influence. And I think we take in the order that's on the program, is that okay? So we'll start with Chris, who will come back to us with comments to supplement what he had to say this morning, on to John, Anne-Marie and then Jennifer. And I'll let you know after 8 minutes. Your time is getting close. Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. So what's expected of researchers? Well, from our perspective, a lot. In 2010, the document ahead of the game, the Blueprint for Reform of the Australian Government Administration, was released, and in that there was special attention paid to the role that research should play in the formation of government policy. As part of that document, it was suggested that there needed to be greater collaboration between the policy arms of government and the research community. And various things have started to be shaped and to be formed to develop that cooperation and collaboration. And I would cite the development of the CRE, and I won't say CRE experiment, I will say the CRE program as one example of a positive move towards developing that relationship. To allow the influence of knowledge and research to come into this policy sphere in a more coordinated and orderly way. The need for knowledge exchange and knowledge sharing in a way that can be understood by policymakers can't be emphasised enough. There's one thing to have a great idea, to have wonderful insights, but in order for that to be picked up by policymakers, it needs to be communicated in a way that will grab their attention and help them to understand the problem. And that means it needs to be presented in a way that will help them do their job. So I would suggest that it's important for yourselves as researchers to take a step back and think about what does the policymaker have to do with this evidence, or how will they be able to work with what I'm presenting. Typically, the people that work in policy departments aren't going to have long pedigrees of research and understanding in a specific area. They'll often be generalist officers that will have some basic skills, an understanding of research and how we go about with, looking at evidence, but they won't have specific knowledge in your area of expertise. What they're looking for is the ability to provide advice to government that is supported by research and evidence. But as I said, how it's actually conveyed is important. So what are some of the things that are going to be interesting for a policymaker? When they hear of some research, some work being undertaken, the first question is, well, so what? Who is going to be affected by this? Who is going to be impacted? I know when ministers get given policy advice, one of their prime concerns is, how does this affect the punter on the street? How can I talk about this in a way that someone in, for instance, Rooty Hill would understand and appreciate? Too often, evidence and ideas can be presented as a sort of a mystery search. We like to build up to a crescendo where we talk about, what has gone on in the past and all the different possibilities, the permutations that have led to this point. And then eventually, with this sort of great denouement, there's this revelation at the end of, well, this could be a possible finding that may be of interest to some people in some circumstances, which can leave policymakers wondering, well, what was that all about? What can I take away and put into my brief? If someone needs to write a brief to a minister, they need to be able to give clear options, yes, but they need to be able to set them out in such a way that the minister will understand. And a level of nuance, which might be acceptable in an academic sphere, that we understand academics don't like to be held up to criticism from other academics, so everything is caveated, or there's always possibility left open that I could be wrong. And fair enough, that's the way things need to be. But the level of scope for error for government is quite wide. I mean, they will make decisions on a limited amount of evidence because they have to make decisions. Policy making won't stop till the evidence is finalised, because that's never going to happen. We always make decisions on the best available evidence. So when you do present your findings and your evidence, it's good that you understand the policy context in which your particular piece of work is coming forth. What have been the recent policy decisions around your work? Are you across that? Do you know what the current government language is? And language will change with governments. Ministers pick up certain terms and certain phrases. You need to understand what they are, so you can package what you are offering to the policymaker in a way that they and then their minister will understand. We are looking for strong research, but we're looking for research that clearly sets out implications for people in terms of what it will deliver on the ground, but also how much will it cost to deliver. There's no good in going to the government with a great idea without any idea of what is the cost of implementation, be it either through resources or through political grief, in terms of what might happen to some people, what is the impact. So we know that there are, as used to be asked of me, who are the winners and losers? You know, if we take this policy setting, if we implement this piece of policy, if we take it to its full extent, who will gain and what are the characteristics of the group that will gain? Who will lose and what are the characteristics of the group that will lose? Very rarely do we have policy that can be implemented that won't have implications for some other area. Either an opportunity cost because government resources or funds will be diverted towards your area. So why should your area of research or policy be given funding over some other area? How can that be defended in public? In terms of working with policymakers, I think, and to reiterate what was said this morning, the need to build relationships, to understand what they need and to build ongoing relationships. We spoke this morning about the need to consult about the, in a sense, the research question, but also the need to have an ongoing dialogue during the formulation of your response to the research question. When researchers take a topic, run away and say, don't disturb me, let me do my research and I'll come back to you with the result and present it as a surprise, that doesn't do the policymakers any good. You need to be able to shape the way the policymaker is thinking. And the only way to do that is to have ongoing dialogue during the process of the research, the evidence gathering, the debate, so that they are prepared and understand where you finally come to. When you're presenting findings in public or in a forum where there are policymakers and predominantly policymakers gathered, you need to know that what is uppermost in their mind is, what can I take away from this to put into a document this afternoon or to add to my research? People don't have spare time. You know, the way the public service is at the moment, we don't have time to have people, you know, be sort of thinkers in residence, as much as that would, you know, we would like to have that. So we go to people that we hope have some expertise, knowledge, have been doing that thinking over a long period of time in a particular topic area. And we'll ask them to share with us the benefits of their thoughts. So what's important is to get to the point, to talk in language that the policymakers will understand, to understand the current policy context, and to understand the environment of the government in which that policy will be delivered. As much as I know at times when I've heard some of the presentations, people like to assure people of their research pedigree and the number of researchers and the quality of the researchers that they are working with. Policymakers by and large don't really care who you're working with and how esteemed your colleagues are, because they won't know who they are. They'll probably never meet them. But what they will focus on is the content of the presentation and the utility of that for forming practical advice to government and for forming clear, distinct options that the government can consider. Now, at the end of the day, we know that it's with the role of governments, it's the minister that makes the decision, it's the government that makes the decision. But as policy advisors, we want to put before them clear options with as much evidence as we can to support those options, and that is both in favour of, you know, the benefits of an approach, but also to highlight what some of the problems of that particular approach will be. And then it's up to a minister to make a decision. So the role that you play as researchers is not one of little import. It's a key role, but it's to help in the formulation of advice. Don't think that the whole policy world rests on your shoulders, and therefore everything has to be exactly right. Otherwise, there could be some error that's discovered in the future. The decision about a policy implementation rests with government, and there will be a whole lot of considerations that go into the making of that decision. The evidence and the policy is an important aspect, but it's not the only aspect. So just be conscious of that, and be honest in all the advice that you give. Academic freedom is what we crave. You know, we need clear, honest advice, unambiguous, hopefully, but clear, honest advice. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Flannery from the Australian Medical Association. I've been there on and off for about, God help me, 12 years now. In between that, I had a 16-month break working for the National Health and Hospitals Reform Commission, which had a wonderful blueprint for health reform, which is still gathering cobwebs somewhere. In that process, I worked with Anne-Marie briefly. She came on board to help us in the final stages of that report, or those reports. Jennifer I've known on and off for years. We've both spent time up in the halls of Parliament House working for various people trying to sell messages. And Leslie, of course, colleagues from way back through her work with the current Prime Minister, and my former work with Kim Beazley and others up on the hill. So we have a bit of a network, and we've all been involved in some way or another trying to sell different messages at different times. I agree with everything that Chris said is true, and I think you'll get no difference of opinion about those core elements of communication that he put out. The big difference, I think, between yourself and people like myself, the AMA, I think you'd call the media tarts of the medical and health world. And we are fortunate in that we are primarily unshackled by responsibility or accountability, or depth of research. The AMA's goal as a membership organisation is to promote the interests of its members, obviously, the medical professionals across all craft groups in the country. But one of the key things we do in our advocacy is rarely talk about doctors. It's the patients and the communities, and they're the sort of shields we use around our messages to communicate through the media, and we're quite effective at it. Public health particularly, our president, I would say, has rarely a day a year where he's not on some radio station around the country talking about obesity, energy drinks, smoking, alcohol, Indigenous health, climate change, all these issues. Fortunately, the AMA does not have the struggle that you as researchers will have to get the profile through which you will get access to the media to sell your message, to get influence, to get into departments, to get into ministers' offices. So I thought I'd just give you a quick overview of what the AMA does and the way it goes about its work to get its messages out. And then that way, I think through the following speakers and later discussion, we'll get an idea of how important it is and how you, as in a different profile, coming from a different direction, can actually use people like the AMA and its advocacy to get your own messages out. I think you'd find whenever there's a community debate about obesity, the AMA will have a view, the APHCRI will have a view, the Public Health Association will have a view, and then what you'll find that there are various pockets of research at various universities or independent researchers will follow up with bits of research or statistics based on their own work which offer a solution or which offer a critique of that which is happening in the debate. And that's the area where people like yourselves can get a foothold into the media debate and into the policy debate, and then get access through to departments and ministers. Having a view or a learned view on contemporary debate coming from different directions is a way to get in there and get your profile up. And as I'll say through this, nurturing relationships with journalists is another way to do that. The ever-shrinking number of specialist health reporters in the country, I think we're down to Sue Dunleavy, Sue Dunleavy and Sue Dunleavy. As a specialist health reporter in the national media is shrinking, while vehicles like The Conversation, Crikey, are gaining in influence because they are omnipresent and controversial, and they do offer a range of opinions, although the AMA doesn't get much of a run in Crikey.
Feel free.
AMA is, like a lot of associations, technically a lobby group. Just a historical reference to the lobby group, it did actually come from places called lobbies outside the political chambers. These days lobby groups are anything from associations, councils, religious groups, institutes, think tanks, NGOs, unions, guilds, societies, consultancies, individuals themselves. And many are in Canberra to be close to the political action. And the most successful lobby groups now on a register are part of the machinery of politics. We spend a lot of time through the media and through personal visit targeting MPs of all persuasions, the senators, their staff, the political parties, the bureaucracy, the press gallery, the national media, and we do a lot of sharing of ideas in forums like this in the health sector in Canberra and nationally. The nature of Parliament House has changed somewhat in the last decade. I think when Jennifer and I were more active up there, the staff, particularly of government, were more Canberra-based, and there was more opportunity to become socially engaged with the political machine to get your messages across, because a lot of them lived here, worked here. There is now far, far more political staff fly in, fly out, and you don't get them here on the regular basis on the golf course or at the school events and that sort of stuff. So I tell our people some of the most opportune and most beneficial places to meet politicians is not in their offices, because they're usually surrounded by bureaucrats and staffers who will keep them away from what they don't want to hear. Places like airport lounges or Aussie's Cafe or places like that at Parliament House where you can get politicians one-on-one away from the guidance of staff is a good place to start. I won't go into the history of the Senate and the Parliament. The press gallery, as I said before, is becoming less. How did I go back on that one? Back one, yeah. Jennifer and Leslie and I would have spent a fair bit of time in the press gallery up in Parliament House, and it's changing on a daily basis. The number of, there's merging of the major masthead papers, there's fewer specialist journalists, there is the emergence of the Global Mail, the UK Guardian newspaper is now setting up a base in the press gallery, and there is less diversity of opinion to influence. If you were to buy the Canberra Times, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age today, half the copy in the first 10 pages will be the same stuff by the same authors. Michelle Grattan, she's gone off in disgust to a degree to work for the Conversation and do some other work, because there's just no place for the multitude of senior experienced heads in political opinion these days. And if you read the News Limited papers, you'll find very little black and white in what they have to say about, I'm sorry, very little colour, it's black or white, mainly black. at the moment. So we spend a lot of time from the AMA populating the press gallery, talking to journalists, nurturing relationships, and those relationships are nurtured over many years to the point where they trust the spin you're giving them. Spin being the truth. And outside that, you've got the national media, which is countless newspapers and agencies, talkback shows, and the rest of them, which you try to get your message out to. The media are very important for you. If, as researchers, the thing you're selling is a message. It's a more complex message than the ones I try to sell. What you do have to do, and this is what Chris was saying, is you have to, in the work you do, give it a human element, a personal element. You have to bring it right down to the lowest common denominator, which can be promoted as being a benefit to a politician. And as he correctly said, politicians want solutions. They want things that voters like. And if you can humanise and personalise and put your research in the perspective of benefits to certain sections of the community, then politicians will be more likely to heed your advice and take your advice on board. On the contrary, if you have research which shows a negative impact for a section of the community, then the tabloid press will probably take your stuff on board. They do like, negative messages sell more newspapers than positives. And that's a sad fact. As you say, the tools we are, the traditional tools, the media releases, transcripts of interviews, media conferences, doorstops, speeches. One of the great tools that we use, because we have 28,000 members, is we survey members on a regular basis. And we can survey subsets, we can survey obstetricians, we can survey ophthalmologists, we can survey general practices over a certain period about certain issues, get their views, package them up into 78% of GPs say this, or 78% of ophthalmologists say that, or whatever. The media, radio love surveys. They love polls, they love surveys. And if you've got a membership or a group that you can survey on a regular basis, test your research, test your ideas, it's an easy way to sell. It's good news copy. Conferences, anytime you attend conferences, let people know you're at the conference, the sort of stuff you're going to put out there, papers, issues, share the ideas. Opinion pieces. With the reduction in numbers of paid journalists on newspapers, there is growing space for contributions from outside experts and opinion makers. Your op-ed pages in some papers now can go to 3 or 4 pages, and that will grow because it's free copy. So if you have thoughtful, intellectual pieces on contemporary politics and contemporary health issues, contemporary any issue, send them off to your newspapers. Start locally and build up nationally. Practice with your local community newspaper, go to your country newspapers, any newspapers. Just get yourself published a few times and then practice on the big ones. Also, like those comment pieces, the TV stations, Sky News, Foxtel, ABC's News 24, there's a lot of TV stations now which have 24-hour content, and they need a lot of talking heads. You will see journalists hosting shows about journalists talking to journalists, and former political staffers holding, Chris Kenny's show with former political staffers talking to political staffers about political staffers. And it does become a bit tedious after a while because they talk about the same things. So that there is space, and you do see with some of these programs that people make an appearance once, and if they do perform well and they create debate, they get invited back, Demographers, scientists, researchers, if they have a view which holds weight and creates debate, they'll get an avenue to talk about those things on a more regular basis. Another thing which is emerging, which I was slow to get onto, which I think I talk to Leslie more through Twitter than I do in person these days. Things like Twitter and social media, you either love them or hate them. I find Twitter, it's a very ego-driven environment. but it is also a rich source of finding and sharing information. If you haven't investigated it, you should investigate it, but you can follow all sorts of leaders in research, in science. You can follow most of the major newspapers, and you can place your own research on Twitter and have people comment on it. But I'm running out of time. Well, I'll come back to these issues in the discussion, but that's just a quick overview of how we go about things.
Okay, I have no PowerPoint slides, so that should speed things up a little bit. I can see that there is definitely going to be an emerging consensus between us all here, which obviously proves that we're right, so that's a good start. What I wanted to do today is talk particularly about communicating with policymakers, and that comes from my role as the director of the Deeble Institute. I'm assuming that very few of you have heard of the Deeble Institute, so I will just give you a very brief explanation. The Deeble Institute for Health Policy Research is a collaboration between 7 universities, the ANU is one of them, and the Australian Healthcare and Hospitals Association. And our purpose is to try and bridge that gap between policymakers, practitioners, health services and clinicians, and researchers. So I'm standing in that space that we're talking about today. The reason I've come in this role is because I've had experience in all those different sectors. So I started off as a clinician, and then I went to Sydney University where I did a Master's and a PhD in health policy, and then have come to Canberra where I worked at the Parliamentary Library, which I'll talk about today, as a researcher there, and with John at the National Health and Hospitals Reform Commission, and also at the Commonwealth Treasury. So I have sympathy for for both researchers and policymakers and practitioners. I also understand some of the sort of, I don't know, idiosyncrasies, I guess, with each of those sectors. So the question that we were asked to talk about is what should be in the mind of researchers when they're working out how to communicate with a generalist audience. And I guess in as simply as possible, the answer to that question is you should be communicating what they want to know, not what you actually know. And it sounds really basic, but it's really hard to do because especially in academia where you do generate a lot of writing. You write all the time and you're writing for a particular audience. You're writing for an academic audience, but it is a very, very different audience to policymakers. And it's a big mind shift, I think, for people to change the way they communicate. Academia has a sort of a language of its own, a culture of its own, and people are used to working in that. And it is a substantial mind shift and also a skill set that's needed to communicate differently. So what I wanted to do is just talk about, from my experience, 2 dilemmas which I have discovered as I've done the shift between the different sectors, talk about a few examples of those and some of the strategies which have I put into practice now in my current job in trying to communicate differently. So the first thing that I think is really obvious when you're inside policy making, when you're dealing with researchers, is that it's really, really hard for researchers to know what it is that policymakers are interested in. It's this big sort of secret world, and policymakers aren't known for sort of talking about policy development. You know, it all comes out in a nice, beautiful, bundled report, or it comes out in a budget or things like that. All the work behind that is secret, and policymakers are very, very concerned about risk and they don't want sort of the internal processes to be revealed. So for academics, it's really hard to know what they're doing and what they're at, you know, what evidence are they looking for? What stage of policy development are they up to? You know, where sort of which direction are they heading? You don't know. And that makes communicating with that audience particularly difficult. For me, when I worked at the Parliamentary Library, the job was to respond to anyone in Parliament House who had a request for some research. So you'd get, you know, a senator or a minister ringing up, or one of their staffers or a backbencher saying, can you tell me what the evidence says about blah? And often they wanted to know now, or, you know, in half an hour's time, or in 2 hours' time, or something like that. And so you don't even know who the audience is. You don't know, what do they know about this topic? Are they experts in it? Do they used to be a GP, for instance? And there are some MPs up there who used to be GPs, and they know this, they've got this amazing sort of background knowledge. Or do they not care about it at all? They just want an answer. They want to put it in their press release or their speech. So it's really hard to to communicate when you don't actually even know the background of the person or the level of knowledge. So I guess the things for me, there's a few sort of strategies that you could put into place to overcome that. The first one is, if you can always find out who you're talking to, that's a really good advantage. It's a good start. So if you can try and just ask a couple of questions at the beginning, if someone's come to you and said, we need to know about this, try and find out what they know. You know, where are you up to in the policy development stage? How much background have you done? Who have you talked to? All of those kind of stuff. Just get as much as you can. Often you have to do it quickly, but try and find out what you can. If you can't get any information about the audience that you're trying to communicate with, try and sort of anticipate it. And this is something that Chris mentioned before. Keep abreast of what's happening in your area and policy development. You know, has there been a new report come out? Have you heard all these rumours in the media or in Twitter or something like that, that the government's working on this, that and the other? Try and have a think about, well, what are they likely to do? I mean, policy development often doesn't take radical turns to the right or the left, or it's always an incremental stage. So it's not hard to get a bit of a sense of where they might be thinking, you know, where are the pressure points that you might like to address. So when you're communicating your research, you need to have this at the forefront of your mind so you can frame your research according to where you think they might be working on. You might not be right, but it's going to be closer than if you just communicate your research as you would in a normal peer-reviewed journal. The other thing is, I guess this is more in general, you can never go wrong if you write in plain English. And that again sounds very simple, but it's really, really difficult to do. One of the things we do at the Deeble Institute is produce evidence briefs for policymakers. And what the model is that we work with academic experts to talk about their research findings, and we produce them. They are for policymakers. And so we spend a lot of time getting the academics to do a draft on a certain topic, and then we spend probably, I would almost say, more time rewriting it than they spent writing it in the first place. And these are often very senior academics that are really good. The writing's perfectly fine for an academic audience, but when you look at it, it's incomprehensible almost to a policymakers. And that's going back to the point that Chris made before, is these people, they don't know the jargon, they don't know the background, they don't sometimes even know what a randomised control trial is. So it's really taking it back to very, very basic level. I'm a big believer in the fact that if you want to communicate with anyone, it should be in plain English, even if it's with academics, and that even complex ideas can be communicated accurately in plain English. It's a challenge, and it takes a lot of effort to develop those skills. And like John was saying, practice. You know, you'll only get there by practicing. Practice writing op-ed pieces. They're short. They're not going to get published if they use jargon or have a lot of assumed knowledge in there. Practice writing pieces for Croaky. They'll accept them if they're, you know, they're well done. So those kind of things are really important. Just a couple of things that I find very commonly that academics do when they're trying to communicate with the policy-making audience is that they spend way too much time on the background. So we'll say, what is the policy issue? And an academic will give me 3 pages or 3 paragraphs or whatever, and they talk about what's happening in Canada, the US, and, you know, all the rest of it. And too much on methodology. What the policymaker wants to know right up front is actually what the policy issue is in a sentence. The policy issue is that, you know, too many young people are drinking excessively or whatever. In a sentence, it cannot be too blunt, in my view. You can put all of that other stuff afterwards, but just convince them right up front that you know what the policy issue is. And it might take quite a few iterations for you to get there. Run it past some other people who know absolutely nothing about your area, your family, for instance, or, you know, a critical audience. And I think you will get the skills eventually if you keep practicing. The second dilemma I really wanted to talk about, that I became very aware of when I was working up at the Parliamentary Library, is the difference between academics and policymakers when it comes to the evidence and the inconsistencies or the gaps in evidence and uncertainty. Academics, I think, are trained to find answers to questions. They acknowledge that there's a lot of uncertainties, but they want to be able to address those uncertainties before they say definitively this is what the answer is. And as Chris mentioned before, is the job of policymakers is to act despite the level of uncertainty. So I think it's again, it's a different mindset. And my experience from the Parliamentary Library was when someone rang up and said, what does the evidence say about this? And you knew that it was about to go into a speech that was going to be delivered in Parliament, you had to be really, really focused on making sure you both presented the evidence, but also presented to them what level of uncertainty was there, because someone doesn't want to go into the floor of Parliament and say, the evidence on so-and-so is clear, when actually it's not. So my policy in this regard is to present the evidence as clearly as you can, but present just as openly and honestly the inconsistencies. And as Chris was saying before, you don't have to live with it. You don't have to make the decision. You don't have to deal with it. You just have to tell them what it is, and then it's the policymaker's decision how to deal with that inconsistency. If they think the evidence is not strong enough, that's their problem, their choice. If they think the evidence is not strong enough and they're going to act anyway, that's their choice. You just have to tell them. So, yeah, there's just, I guess, 7 top tips I wanted to finish with, just to let you know what, from my experience, are the important things. First one is finding ways to publish outside peer-reviewed journals. Get practice doing that, because policymakers will look for things they find on Google. They don't read peer-reviewed journals that often. Write in plain English. It's always worth putting in the time and effort, even though it probably takes you much longer to do it. Be prepared when if you're meeting policymakers, be prepared with 3 really interesting things about your research, so you can tell them. You don't have to satisfy them with everything you know about the topic. You just have to get their attention and start a conversation. Don't be afraid to talk about the limits of your research or the research in the field. Put a lot of time and effort into establishing relationships with policymakers if you can. If you can't, find people who do, who work with them, people like us and people like APHCRI. Keep abreast of the policy issues in your area so that you can easily frame your research and making it relevant, and cut to the chase when you're talking with policymakers and address what they want to know up front, not at the end of what you're writing. That's it. Thanks.
I don't think there's anything left for me to say. That's the good thing about being last, or maybe the bad thing, I don't know. Anne-Marie had 7 dot points. I've only got 6 principles, but I've also got a book, so there you go. This is my first one. Get some perspective. Sorry, I've got a cold, that's why my voice is sounding like this. In the olden days, when John and Leslie and I worked in Parliament House, they had at the press gallery, where all the journos hang out, press boxes where people will go and put in their press releases. And that's one of the first things that I saw when I was taken on a tour when I started working for a politician. Also up at the press gallery, there was a button. We were told, on pain of death, you do not press that button unless it is a world-changing event. That button sends an alarm all around the press gallery. Every journalist comes running to find out what has happened. The first week I started, there was another girl that started. This is the Patagonian toothfish. She worked on the Patagonian toothfish. She was our environment researcher. She was incredibly bright, incredibly passionate. She spent the whole first week in Parliament working on an issue of an international agreement to save the Patagonian toothfish, running from minister's office to minister's office. The end of the week, she finally got the sign-off, went up to the press gallery with a press release, pushed the button. Every single journalist came running, probably John was there. Every single journalist came running to find out which, minister had been assassinated or who had toppled the Prime Minister. And she said, we've saved the Patagonian toothfish. And let me tell you, if you haven't seen Laurie Oakes running, you haven't lived. So, I have no idea. I can't remember what was high on the political priorities of the press gallery journos that week, but I'm pretty sure it had nothing to do with the Patagonian toothfish. And, my point there obviously is, not that she was stupid and not that she was wrong, because quite possibly, the fate of the Patagonian toothfish is probably more important to our planet than what was happening in politics that week. But her perspective on the issue was, completely wrong. Clearly, she, could not stand back from her focus and her passion to see that for, the journalists trying to write copy on a political event in Parliament House that day, this was so far off the radar that, they didn't even want to hear about it. My second one know your audience. And again, this is something that you know, Chris and John and Anne-Marie have talked about. Chris talked about policy makers in the Department of Health. Well, I was one of those a long time ago. That was my first job out of uni. I not only didn't know what a randomised control trial was, I did not know the first thing about healthcare. I had an honours degree in Latin, in philosophy. You know, I knew a lot about Socrates. I hadn't been to the doctor, I don't think, since I was 12. I had no understanding practically or intellectually of health policy. My first placement was in case mix, hospital funding. When they told me, I thought I was going to do baking. I swear to God. So, no, the point is, I wasn't stupid again. I learned, you know, and I got there. But if one of you had come to talk to me in that first rotation, you would have probably gone away thinking I was a complete idiot, because I really needed things broken down into very, very, very basic, simple terms. I probably didn't even understand, you know, the basics that Chris said. I really had absolutely no understanding, you know, at all. So, and as Anne-Marie said, that can be very different. You know, you might go to meet someone like Anne-Marie who, you know, knows everything. You might go and meet, you know, Jane Holton, who's outlasted 5 health ministers, probably outlast 5 more. But, you know, having a bit of a feel for who it is that you're talking to, and again, this is something John and Chris and Anne-Marie have brought up, it is absolutely really important. And, you know, obviously this probably goes without saying it, you know, they might know nothing. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean they want to learn. And most people in the Department of Health, however new they are keen, you know, they're there probably because they care about the health system. They are keen to learn, and it's your opportunity, you know, to educate them. Another one is understanding the politics of the situation, and that's politics on, you know, the big scale, the Julia Gillard politics, and policy on the micro scale. Just, you know, within the health department, within an organisation, you know, there's always politics. And I know that, you know, researchers often find that very frustrating. Politics, you know, everyone finds politics frustrating, but it's a reality. It's, you know, it's important. You know, this is a picture of a child with tooth decay. Why have I got that up there? Because this is much more likely to be a child from Queensland than any other state in Australia. That's not because children in Queensland are genetically predisposed to tooth decay. It's not because water's different, you know, up there, except it's a political decision not to put fluoride in the water. Queensland has been, you know, it's the only state in Australia that doesn't have a statewide policy to put fluoride in their water. Labor government introduced a similar policy, and that's now been reversed by the current government up there. That means that, you know, children born in Queensland are much more likely to get tooth decay. The science is absolutely the same all around Australia. It's the politics that are different. If you want to make a difference to children's teeth in Queensland, you have to deal with the political issue, not the scientific one. And I know, you know, the health sector, health researchers are a lot better at doing this than a lot of other areas of health research. So I'm not, you know, implying at all that you don't do this already. I'm just highlighting that it is an issue. I know, you know, I deal with researchers in other areas, and I have to say I'm usually really impressed, maybe because a lot of health researchers have a clinical background, and there's probably a lot of politics within hospitals, within healthcare services. I know my partner is a researcher as well in the area of physics, and when I told him what I was doing today, he said, well, you know, tell them they should have nothing to do with politics. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, clearly, look what happened to Galileo. So, you know, you're a lot far further ahead of the physicists, that's for sure. Again, this is something Anne-Marie and John and Chris came up with. Solve their problem, don't solve your problem. No one's interested in hearing about what your problems are. But the best way to get someone's attention is to show them how you're solving their problem. You know, when, as John said, you know, when he and his friends go to the government saying that, you know, GPs need more money, they never say GPs need more money. I mean, GPs do need more money. They should probably get paid more money. But, you know, that's their problem. That's the AMA's problem. It's GP's problem. It's not the government's problem. Going and saying how patients can get better care, how people can get health, you know, better health outcomes, that's the government's problem. And if, as a, you know, incidental effect of that, GPs end up getting more money, well, you know, it's a win-win. So, And a really good example, I think, of that is, you know, as John talked about, looking at the tabloid media. And for a while in the 90s, I lived in Adelaide, and one of my favourite things to do on a Saturday was to get the Advertiser and just watch how they put the Adelaide spin on every single, you know, major story that was going around. Their main aim seemed to be to tie every global event to Adelaide and to the residents of Adelaide. And one of my favourite examples was when Tony Blair was elected, and the headline was something like "Adelaide boy gets top job," where they found he'd lived there briefly for 9 months when he was 3. They found the house where he'd lived. They interviewed the boy who was in the bedroom, which may have been his. They weren't sure. They interviewed the current headmaster of the school he would have gone to had he been old enough to go to a school when he was 3. When Princess Diana died, they focused on a woman in North Adelaide who that very morning had found a puddle shaped like Diana on her back deck. I mean, this is plainly ridiculous, but the idea is you find, you know, a connection between what your audience wants to know about and what you want to tell them. Hopefully not as ridiculous as that. And again, as I think Anne-Marie just said, practice, get better at pitching your story to your audience. Again, when I worked in Parliament House, as I'm sure Leslie and John will know, it's a bit like a revolving door if you work for a politician in the health sector, of meetings, you know, some days 6, 8 meetings of health groups, health experts coming in, telling you what the story is, what they can offer you. And, you know, pretty much all of them want to save the world, pretty much all of them have good evidence. You know, I don't recall once in my 6 years someone coming in saying, we want to kill people and we're too expensive. So, you know, you have to find what you're doing to save the world that's different from what other people do. And that can take some practice. It can take some, you know, understanding of where they're at, as the other speakers have said. This is something that Anne-Marie's journal uses, which I think is a really good template to frame communicating to policymakers. So what problem does my research address? What's already known about this issue? Put it in context. You're not the only one in the area. What does my research add? Why is it different? How does it contribute uniquely? And the last thing is tell a story. That's, you know, again, really, really simple, but people remember stories. They remember anecdotes. If you can encapsulate what you're trying to say in a story, people are, you know, 100 times more likely to remember it. That's not based on research. But, you know, if you can find I've heard Tanya Plibersek speak, you know, 1 million times. The one thing I remember is a story she tells about a mother that she met who had such bad dental problems. She couldn't go to the first day. Her child had been selected to go to a scholarship for a private school. She was too embarrassed to take him there on the first day because of her bad dental problems. That's the only thing I remember. You know, I remember that because, you know, I'm a mum, I've got young kids, she's a mum, she's got young kids. That's our connection. Find stories that connect people, that connect your experience as a researcher to, you know, the experience of the person, the policymaker that you're talking to. So they're my principles. And here's the book. The first chapter of this book, you know, there's a lot of books that tell you about communicating and government relations and policy making and lobbying, but you don't need to read them. You need to read the first chapter of this book because it does it all, and it's funny and it's clever, and it tells you exactly what you need to do and how communication works in between the bureaucracy and the political level, what they're after, and how to get through to them. So, you know, you can leave all those theories and all the complicated textbooks aside and just read the first chapter of that, and you'll probably enjoy it as well. Okay, thank you.